And it's time for the live stream pre-show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. If you're watching this on a replay, we're going to get this thing started in about 10 minutes. You can hang out here with us, or you can fast forward. Now, what was I doing? We need to put the promo bar on the website. Let's save that. I've already got it ready to go. I have already done my podcast intro. You missed all that fun. That was great. There we go. That's live. And updated. Let's listen to the live stream and make sure that it is all right. All right. Let's hear. All right. Let's hear. Well, that's pretty good. That's a very, very fast. That's a very, very fast. What is that? Like 2 seconds worth of latency? That's really good. That's fantastic. That's almost instantaneous, which is great since we have these live Q&A that we're going to do. It's nice to have some type of live feedback. Let's get that on there. There's a live. If you are watching this on the YouTube side live, then you might want to head on over to professormesser.com/live. I should have probably put that on the YouTube description. It's probably too late for that. All right, well, so much for that idea. But you can just listen to me and I'll tell you. I should probably do a lower third that says that and then pop it up whenever I want. These are the things that always come to me as I'm now about to start a live stream and have no time to do any of that. So there is that. Camera check would be nice. Let's see how this looks. Not bad. Pretty well centered. Kind of nice, although I'm probably going to slump as we go along. It goes till about here, about halfway through. Then we've got the bird cam. It's the bird cam. We need to get the presentation screen up and running. That's good enough for now because we've got my screen in front of me and the laptop to my right is there. So that all works. It's all working, people. Welcome, welcome. Hello, chat room. I am monitoring the chat room at professormesser.com/live. There's a chat room there, the live event chat, the aptly named live event chat. And you can, of course, join us there as well. It's the Network Plus study group, by the way. Network Plus, that's it right there. Network Plus. We'll be doing that. I got plenty of questions. Let's get our presentation up and running. There we go. That's very nice. All right. What else? Are we good? Are we good? I think we're good. I think we're pretty good. Let's turn off the laptop, turn off the Omnia. I think just us listening. Okay. That's pretty good. We've got another 7 or so minutes until we get started. For those of you following along, if you're watching this on the replay, you know exactly how far you can fast forward or hang out with us. Let's see. Chat room is working fine. We're back on the 720p stream, though, because it works. Because this is the stream that works. It's only been working for years. Why would I change it at this point? I'm thinking of going the other direction. Maybe making this a 360p only. Something like that. I'm going back and forth over it. I want to be able to do the entire live stream over barbed wire networking. So it's just an idea I've been toying with. We'll see how this turns out. Oh, it's a scorcher outside. I wish I had my camera back up. I had my video card go out in my bird feeder server. Got to get that replaced. And then we'll be in good shape. Why is there What does this USB cable go to, do you think? Oh, it goes to my editing system. We'll put that over there. Just random cables scattered about the desk, wondering where they go. See a USB connection, wondering, did I disconnect something? Normally, this screen is not all the way back here. It's normally closer to me, as is the one on the right. So they're on arms. I just kind of move them forward. And this big control box, this control center here for the video switching is not usually in front of me. In fact, the laptop isn't even here. All of this is completely different. So every time I do a live stream, I sort of bring all these parts together. I'm moving screens. Things are always popping out. You never know what's the cable goes awry. You're never quite sure exactly what's up with that. So that's where we are right now. What else do we have to do? Well, we've got the live stream podcast promo was already done. The chat rooms are up and running. Chat rooms are up and running on the live page. I think that's it. I think that's in pretty good shape here with 5 minutes to go. Noticing my soundboard has a different time on it though. I need to fix the time on the soundboard. That'll be something else to do. The NTP should be picking that up, and it is not. So I need to find out why it is not NTPing as it should be. It's supposed to be automatic, isn't it? Doesn't NTP solve all of our problems? And there's an example of it not solving any problem at all. Not working for me. The screen in front of me, though, is. The times that I have in front of me are okay. The times on my TriCaster are okay, which you can't see, but they're on a big screen that's just up above between my lights. I really should zoom out of that one day and let you see this monstrous lighting system we have in here. In fact, that light is to my left is not quite, it's not quite right. Let's see, this one over here. It is kind of dark over there. I need to adjust that just a bit, just a tad. All right, hold on, everybody. Just wait a second. We're not getting started yet. Not yet. Not yet. I got to fix lights. I got to turn things. You, it probably will look exactly the same. And it sort of does. But it's different to me. I might even adjust those a little bit later before the next study group. So we got that going on. So there's my adjustment of the week. Getting that going. So we'll see what we're doing here. What else is going on? What else do we have to do here? I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we are in good shape. We're recording. Are we recording? Let's see. We are recording. There we go. I don't know why you're looking at me. What good am I on the pre-show? I need to change how this camera is mounted. I've been noticing when I tap my desk, it shakes a little bit. My desk is a big desk, and when it moves, the whole thing just sort of goes back and forth. So I wonder if there's a better way to mount that without it being on a tripod. That's the thing. That's pretty much what you have to do is put it on a tripod. And that's not, that I don't want to do that. So there we are. That was easy. We went all the way through that whole decision-making process. You were here with me live as we were going through that. These are the things I think about in production. I've got to start some more videos, another video series very shortly. I've been working through getting content ready. I'll be shooting that next. And then there might be one right after that. I'm not sure yet. So we got to figure those things out. But here we are, Network Plus. We're getting down to the end of the old Network Plus, aren't we? We'll talk about that in a moment. We'll talk about the rest of Network Plus, what people are doing with their plans. The N10006, the N10007. Do I have screens for that? I'm certain I do. The problem is I do a lot of this prep the week before. So that's why you see this. I don't. Oh, yeah, I do. I have a screen for that. There's a screen for that. But I forget what I do. That was a long time ago. It was days ago. How am I supposed to remember that? So much has happened in my world in the last... Yeah, practically nothing's happened. So here we are. Let's get about ready. We've got almost ready to go. Almost top of the hour here. Another 20 seconds. We'll get this party going, especially since you're only behind me by 2 seconds. So now you're really on time. I used to have about a 20-second lead. Now it's spot on. So there's not a lot of waiting that has to happen now. So we can just go right to it, and everybody's with me, and we're all good to go. So let's do that. Here we go with the study group, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2018 Network Plus Study Group from ProfessorMesser.com. I'm James Messer. I'll be your host, coming to you live from Messer Studios here in our world headquarters in Tallahassee, Florida. Thanks for joining us. We have an entire hour of Network Plus Q&A coming up. Not only Q&A that I give you over this live stream, but you get to participate live. You get to answer, and then we get to see how everyone did. Nice interactive, internet-based Q&A that we're going to have. In the second hour, I will be opening up the phone lines, and we'll be looking at the chat room, and we'll be answering questions from there. We've already got a couple of questions that came already through in the pre-show here and there. We will also, in that chat room, I'll be monitoring that live. This is the chat room that's on ProfessorMesser.com. So if you're watching this video live on the YouTube, then you may want to flip over to ProfessorMesser.com/live so you can participate in the live chat room. We've got a lot to go through. I've got plenty of questions that have been written up. There's a lot happening with Network Plus right now, so we'll talk about that. Don't forget that I have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question that comes to you live on Twitter. You can subscribe to my Twitter, follow on Twitter, click on the Twitter at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. YouTube videos are always available at ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. And of course, you get voucher discounts available at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. I'm able to do these study groups because you are nice enough to watch my videos. And if you go to YouTube and subscribe, that helps a lot. Some people like to have an offline version of these videos. You can certainly purchase one of those. That includes the videos themselves. You can buy the MP3 files or get it bundled with the videos. My course notes are included with these things. I send them all to you on a flash drive. You can find out more about that at ProfessorMesser.com/GetNetPlus. I have some Inten 006 pop quiz archives that come directly from these study groups. So if you'd like to get some Q&A help, you can go to ProfessorMesser.com/popquiz, where I have some A+, some Network Plus, hopefully some new Security Plus will be coming soon. You'll be able to get your hands on those as well. I've got to go back and archive. The Network Plus and Security Plus have relatively new content, so we have to add that new content into the pop quiz listing. Don't forget that you can get an audio version replay of this study group available at ProfessorMesser.com/podcast. If you go to podcast or podcasts, podcast is so much easier for me to say. So you can go to either one of those, and I have all of my study groups available for you to subscribe with your podcast application, or you can listen live right on that page at ProfessorMesser.com/podcast. I usually have these available just an hour or two after the live stream is done. Sometimes it takes the next day because who knows what's going on in my world. But be patient. I will get those posted. And if you're subscribed to the podcast, they just appear automatically in your podcast listening program. Well, for those of you that have been watching the Network Plus certification, you know that there are two certification exams you could take right now. You choose one or the other. One is the Inten 006, one is the Inten 007. So both of these are available for you to take. The Inten 007 is the newer exam. It was released in March of this year. So for the next 3 years or so, that will be the version of exam that's available. The Inten 006 has been around since February of 2015, and CompTIA is in the process of sunsetting that certification exam. That exam will be retired on August 31st. So as we make this video today, it is August the 8th. That means you have less than a month until that exam goes away forever. Some people are still studying to take their Inten 006. People will be taking the Inten 006 exam up until the last day that that exam is available on August the 31st. If you're someone who is just getting started with Network Plus, then you should probably opt to take the Inten 007. It usually takes a number of months to study all of these materials, get them embedded into your brain, and get you in a place where you're ready to take the exam. And if you're starting right now, make sure all of your exam materials match the Inten 007 number. So check your exam materials. You don't want to study from the N10006 and walk in to take the N10007 or vice versa. So make sure that you have the right study materials for the right exam that you're going to take in order to optimize, to have the best possible chance of passing that certification exam when you walk in. Along those lines, everything we're doing today will be from the N10007 exam. Some of the things we do today will also apply to the N10006. There's about 30%, just over 30% of the material on the N10007 is new from the N10006. So we've got about a third of the exam that's been changed. So make sure that you're very aware of what those differences might be, and you'll be ready to go as well. We will be doing live Q&A today. So if you are watching this live, you can participate. Now, if this is the replay of this study group that we are doing live on August the 8th at noon Eastern Time, if it's a replay, then you can't have this live participation. This process won't work for you. But if you are here live, first, thanks for being here. Secondly, open up a new tab in your browser. Go to professormesser.com/QA. And that will take you directly to the questions and answers. You don't have to change your browser. You don't have to go to another window. You just stay on that page, and I will change it for you. There are also apps available on the different stores that you can download. You want the Socrative student app. Socrative is the service that we're using for this. You want the app that's for students. You don't want the teacher app. That's my app. So make sure you get the student app. It may ask you for a room name. It will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer. All one word, all lowercase, PROFESSORMESSER. And if you do all of those things, if you are able to follow those instructions, then you will find there's a question waiting for you. And that question is one from last week. And it asks, which of these technologies would most commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor? And your possible answers are A, Radius, B, CAC, C is TACAX plus, D is TOTP, and E is LDAP. Which of those technologies would most commonly use a certificate as an authentication factor? One of the challenges you have with these questions, by the way, is there could be answers in here that could use a certificate as an authentication factor, but that was not the question. Make sure you read through those questions very carefully that ask which one of these would most commonly use an authentication factor. This is a question that we had last month. So this is your test to see if you're able to get to the study group and answer the questions. If you're able to go to professormesser.com/QA, then you're able to do that. And you're also able to see, once you answer this, by the way, I'm able to see this live, not to give away the answer already, but you can see that 51% of us have said Radius, 25% have said CAC. Everybody's changing it now that you've seen the answer. 13% say LDAP, and then single digits for TACAX Plus and TOTP. And if you were here last month, you know this is indeed the certificate-based authentication that is available in a common access card. These are cards that are provided to the U.S. Department of Defense. They have your picture ID. There's information about you. It's effectively your ID card, but they have a smart chip in them. There's your chip right there. So that's a smart card. And that chip has this information on it, such as a certificate that can be associated with this card and ostensibly with you. So that is why, of all the options here that talk about a certificate, the CAC always uses a certificate as an authentication factor 99.99999% of the time, 100% of the time. Why would you not have a certificate on your CAC? That's really the point of having this. I think it is a requirement. So 25% of you that said CAC got that one right. 49% of you said Radius. And although Radius can use a certificate as part of authentication, it's not something that you commonly see. In fact, it's very unusual to see that being used with Radius, although it is certainly possible to configure a Radius server to use certificates. TACAX Plus, a similar scenario where certificates can be used, but it's just not something that's very common. TOTP and LDAP are not really authentication factors. So I guess TOTP would be an authentication factor, but that's one where the numbers are provided to you. And then LDAP is not an authentication factor. It's a more of a method behind the scenes of performing authentication, but it is not a factor in and of itself. So a CAC is a smart card. So that's why it has in it a certificate so that you can then identify yourself. And usually there's something like 802.1x or some other method that is used to check that certificate and make sure the certificate is in place, it matches you. And then, of course, there's other authentication factors that are certainly used along with this, like a username, a password, and who knows what else. Maybe there's biometrics or some other type of authentication factors as well. So if you answered BCAC, you got that one absolutely right. There's our study group rewind for the month. Now we need some new questions. So let's jump into the Network Plus Q&A, and I have some questions for you. One of the things I'll let you know also is that the first question on the study group, the first official question after the rewind question, is a performance-based question. Now, if you've never taken a CompTIA exam before, you may have thought that all the questions are multiple choice, and the bulk of the exam is multiple choice. But the first handful of questions on the exam are not multiple choice. They are anything but multiple choice. They are fill in the blank. They are matching questions. They are scenario questions that ask you to perform a function at the command line. They are questions that'll ask you to put things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. You need to be very aware of what you'll be sitting down and facing. Some people don't realize that these are simply a handful of questions at the beginning. They start getting into this and they think every question on the exam is going to be this complex set of scenarios that they'll be faced with, or these matchings that they'll be faced with all the way through the exam. That's not the case. In fact, for me, I like jumping over the performance-based questions and going straight to the multiple choice, going all the way through all of the multiple choice, and then coming back and attacking those performance-based questions at the very beginning. That's my strategy. Yours might be a little bit different. Find the one that works for you. Find the one that works with the way that you like to take exams, and find one that works with the way that you like to manage your time. All of that said, the first question I like to give you is a performance-based question. So our performance-based question today it's kind of a matching question, except online, I don't have a way for you to match things. So you're just simply going to effectively fill in the blank for this particular question. And the question is about the OSI model. And I want to know what OSI layer is associated with each one of these descriptions. So I've got 1 through 5. So if you think the OSI layers are OSI 1 for all 5 of these, you would put 1 is 1, 2 is 1, 3 is 1, 4 is 1, and 5 is 1. They are not all OSI layer 1. There's a little hint for you. You probably figured that out already. But let's step through each of these, and then you can decide which OSI layer is associated with this. Number 1 is the default gateway is 192.168.1.1. What OSI layer is associated with that? Number 2 is a login screen shows invalid password. Number 3 is a wireless signal is repeated every 5 kilometers. Number 4, a TCP port 80 is blocked at the firewall. And 5 is the MAC address of a server is 00:AB:11:27:83:CF. Everybody got that MAC address down? It could happen, I guess, when you see these. So those are the OSI layers that you should be able to figure out. So you should associate an OSI layer. And I'm not even going to give you what the possibilities are. You have to know what the OSI layers are. You have to know how many layers there are in an OSI model. And if you do know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. Don't give any hints in the chat room. That would be a bad thing. We don't want you to be muted for the rest of the study group. We want you to go to professormesser.com/QA and answer there. So this will be just like sitting down at a real exam and trying to answer these OSI questions. This is a question, by the way, that applies both to the 006 exam and the 007 exam. So if you're somebody who's working towards that 006, trying to get it done just before things finish up at the end of the month, this question would apply to you as well. Sometimes these would be a matching question on the exam. They might have the list of OSI layers on one side, and you have to maybe drag and drop or match them over, sort of like that. They might give you this and say, put these in order from the lowest OSI layer to the highest OSI layer. They might not even ask you what layer it is. So that's up to you to figure out, and then you've got to put them in order. You never know what they're going to give you. But if you know the material, it doesn't matter how they ask these questions of you. If you know what's in here, then you know exactly what these questions will be. You know how to answer these questions. It doesn't matter if it's a multiple choice or fill in the blank or a performance-based question such as this one. You will know the answer for all of these. So for those of you listening in, I'll give you these again. Number one is the login gateways 192.168.1.1. Number two is a login screen shows invalid password. Number three is that a wireless signal is repeated every 5 kilometers. Number four is a TCP port 80 is blocked at the firewall. And number five is the MAC address of the server is 00 Alpha Bravo 112783 Charlie Foxtrot. Maybe you know what those answers are. Let's see how we did. We don't have a way to review a summary of this because this was a fill-in-the-blank question online, but let's step through each one of these and see if we can figure out which ones these happen to be. So let's start with the first one. The default gateway is 192.168.1.1. Anytime you see an IP address associated with something you're working on, maybe it's the IP address of a workstation, maybe it's a route that's in a routing table, that's a layer 3 type of issue. So anytime you see anything associated with IP address and an IP address only, you can automatically think there's a layer 3 that we need to deal with associated with that. Number two is a login screen shows invalid password. Now, already looking at a login screen, we must be running some type of application, some type of front end. It's showing us a message on the screen. It's getting to our eyeballs. Therefore, it's an application issue, OSI layer 7. So that's one where you have this conglomeration of layers. The layers 5, 6, and 7 are kind of blended together. But anytime we're seeing something on the screen as a human, then it is a layer 7 issue. So you can think of it that way. The third one is a wireless signal is repeated every 5 kilometers. This must be a high frequency, very powerful signal. I guess the same thing would apply to laser connection, an optic fiber, laser over optic fiber. Anytime you're doing repeating, where there is simply regeneration of a signal and sending it on, there's no check of MAC addresses, there's no check of IP addresses, there's no port numbers associated with this. That's a layer 1. That's a physical layer issue, a physical layer scenario. So if you answered layer 1 for number 3, you got that one right. The fourth one is a TCP port 80, blocked at the firewall. Boy, that would really not make my day if port 80 was blocked at my firewall. That would make me very sad. And because it's a port number, that's an OSI layer 4 issue. Anything at that transport layer is going to be OSI layer 4. Anything that you're talking about, a TCP port number, a UDP port number, that's something at layer 4. So we can call somebody and say, we're having a layer 4 issue. Something appears to be blocking a particular port number. And lastly, we have the MAC address of a server, 00 Alpha Bravo 112783 Charlie Foxtrot. Anytime we're down at the MAC address layer, we're dealing with these hexadecimal values or dealing with switching. Anything that happens that has a decision that it's making based on MAC addresses, then that's layer 2 of our OSML. The data link control layer, the DLC layer, that's a DLC address. If you were on a wide area network link, it might be a DLC address of a DTE and a DCE. So there's a good example for those and looking at that. So the MAC address of that server, that's definitely a layer 2 issue. Some people saying, but wait, doesn't layer 6 handle authentication? Well, it may, but we aren't talking about the authentication process with number 2. We're talking about what we see on a login screen. Login screen shows invalid password. So it's something that we're viewing. We aren't talking about the authentication process internally performed a particular function. This is way after any of that happened. We're already through the authentication. We're viewing what the results of a particular function were on our screen. And that's why I specifically said the login screen is showing something. So there's a good idea of where you can kind of parse out the differences between what's layer 5, what's layer 6, what's layer 7, and being able to work through those. So hopefully you were able to do this very quickly. Number 1 was layer 3. Number 2 was layer 7. Number 3 was layer 1. Number 4 was layer 4. And number 5 was layer 2. If you aren't familiar with the OSI model, you aren't familiar with these layers, they could certainly pop up on the exam. They're part of the N10006 and the N10007 exam objectives. Make sure you are aware of those. Let's get to another question so we can keep things moving. I've got one available. All the rest of the questions today, by the way, are multiple choice, so we don't have any more issues associated with fill in the blank or performance-based or any of that. Here's our next question. Which of the following would be most associated with the WPA2 802.1x? Which of the following would be most associated with WPA2 802.1x? Would it be PGP? Would it be RC4? Would it be SSL? Would it be WPS? Or would it be LDAP? Those are our 5 options: PGP, RC4, SSL, WPS, and LDAP. Which one of those would be most associated with WPA2 802.1x? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put any hints or messages in the chat room. There is no layer 8 of the OSI model. Sort of an old joke in the information technology world is once you get above the application layer, it's the political layer. It's the argument layer. There's a lot of different terms that you can use for layer 8. For the purposes of what you need to know on your exam, layers 1 through layer 7 will do fine. That's how we work with that. Don't worry about anything beyond the scope of that. You'll be fine. These are also things you need to know both for the 006 and the 007 exam. So this particular question will apply to you regardless which exam you're. I'd be glad to stop saying this, by the way, at the end of the month. This will be our last study group that has both the 006 and the 007 exam questions in them. Going forward, it's all going to be 007 for the next few years. So that's something that will end at the end of the month. That's one where I get to walk in on the 1st of September and start removing things from the website. It makes me sad. You have all of this training material that's very, very useful, and then on one particular day it becomes completely worthless. So there you go. That's my world of me becoming completely worthless. Let's see how we did with these answers. You can see that 40% of you said WPS. 23% of you said LDAP. We have a tie for third, 16% each of RC4 and SSL, and then 4% with PGP. This is one of the things the exam expects of you, is that it doesn't give you anything directly straight out. It expects you to understand what some of these things are and then be able to apply them. So you'll notice the answers here are all acronyms. You have to know what these acronyms are for the Network Plus exam. Probably more acronyms in Network Plus than A+, certainly more than A+, certainly more than Security Plus. We love acronyms in networking. And so you have to not only know what WPA2 802.1x is, but you also have to know how that is applied and how it works and how these things work together. And if you're choosing that option, what are you associating with this? Well, let's look at the different wireless security modes and what those might be related to. This is where you're configuring your wireless access point, and you have a number of different modes available that you could choose. You might have an open system where there's no password or passphrase associated with it. You might be configuring a type of shared key. Maybe it's something where everybody has what we call a pre-shared key or a PSK. You'll see that sometimes listed on here as PSK, the pre-shared keys. The pre-shared keys are one where everybody gets the same key. It's not very secure. It works in your home. Hey, everybody, the shared key that everybody uses. If you have friends come over, yeah, you can get on my wireless network. Here's the shared key. You're not worried about your friends hacking your network later. Ideally, it would be nice if everybody had a different key. And that's why a lot of organizations will configure 802.1x. This means that you authenticate to the wireless network using credentials that are stored somewhere else. It's very common, for example, for most people to have credentials stored on a Microsoft Active Directory database. So you might have a normal Windows login that you always use, which is the first initial of your first name and their last name. So J Messer is my login name. It's not the one I use, but very common to see that in many organizations. Or you might have an ID number that you use instead of your name. And then you put in a password, and it's what you use to authenticate everywhere. Use that username and password to authenticate into Windows. Use it to authenticate to the VPN. Use it to gain access to the printer. Maybe it gets you into the lunchroom. It's the username and password you use for everything. So, of course, it's the username and password you should use to gain access to the wireless network. But we need to configure our wireless access point not only to use this methodology where you're using this very known username and password for you, but there has to be some way to do a check on that. When you log into the wireless network and you provide your first initial, last name, and then your password, how do you check to see if that's right? Well, that's where the 802.1x comes in, because it needs to check against an authentication server. And this authentication server could be running Radius, it could be running TACX Plus, or it could be running LDAP. So those are very common authentication methods. Those of you that answered LDAP, that is what would be most associated with 802.1x. What's nice about this method, by the way, is you aren't sharing passwords. The password can't get out because it's yours. Your username and your password. And if you were to leave the organization or you were to move to a different department that didn't have wireless access, you would not be able to log in with your username and password any longer, but everyone else would be able to work. Can you imagine if we all had a shared password and suddenly it got out? We had to change the shared password, and then we had to tell everybody what the new shared password is. It just doesn't scale. It doesn't apply. It's not very good security either. So that's why 802.1x is so popular. Let's look at these different options here and see what's here. We have 38% of you said WPS. WPS is certainly a way that devices could connect to a network, but usually WPS is using some type of personal identification number. In fact, WPS has been known to have security issues, has a vulnerability or shortcoming associated with the architecture of WPS. So that would not be what would be associated with 802.1x. In fact, 802.1x is much better than WPS. We had that tie for third, RC4 and SSL. RC4 is not used in WPA2, so that would not be the encryption method. Maybe if you were using a WEP, you would be using RC4. SSL, way up the application layer, has nothing to do with WPA2 and has nothing to do with 802.1x. And PGP is a way to encrypt information that's pretty good privacy, or the free version is GPG, GNU Privacy Guard. So either one of those is used to encrypt data, but it again has nothing to do with wireless networks, has nothing to do with WPA2, and has nothing to do with 802.1x. In this case, the only answer that you can really point to say isn't associated at all with WPA2 and 802.1x is LDAP. That would be E. 26% of you got that one absolutely right. So make sure you are very familiar with those wireless security modes. This is a question, as I mentioned, that could come up on the 006 or the 007. On the 007, it's section 4.3, wireless encryption. That may be one to go through so that you're familiar with every single one of those possible security postures, those security modes, so that you're familiar exactly how to set up your wireless network for the best possible security. Let's get another question in. We've got more questions available. Here's the next one. This question is, speaking of Active Directory, a user's trying to log in to a Microsoft Active Directory network, but the authentication fails each time. The user has confirmed that the username and password are correct. Which of these would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be that A, the browser is missing? Would it be A, a browser is missing a trusted certificate? Would it be B, the time on the workstation is incorrect? Would it be C, the DHCP scope is exhausted? Or would it be D, a duplicate MAC address is on the network? Which of those would be the most likely reason for this issue? A user is trying to log into a Microsoft Active Directory network. The authentication fails each time. The user has confirmed that the username and password are correct. They're sure of it. It must be true. Which of these would be the most likely reason? Would it be A, the browser is missing a trusted certificate? Would it be B, the time on the workstation is incorrect? Would it be C, the DHCP scope is exhausted, as I am? Or would it be D, a duplicate MAC address is on the network? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can figure out. Take your best guess. Don't Google. No Googling. This is as if we're sitting there on the exam, and no mentioning that in the chat room either. We don't want to figure out what those different possibilities or differences might be, go to professormusser.com/QA if you think you know the answer. So folks, also in the chat room, although you're in the general chat, not the live event chat, but I'm looking at both of them. So I'm working with you. Ask the port-based network access control, or what we could just call NAC. You'll see it mentioned as PNAC, but in the industry, we just call that NAC, network access control. Is that 802.1x? Well, network access control very commonly uses 802.1x, but 802.1x is not network access control. Network access control incorporates a number of different things, including a back-end authentication. It might talk to your switches and configure your switch to put you in a particular VLAN based on your authentication. There's lots of things that happen with NAC. There's a lot of moving parts with NAC. That's why a lot of companies don't generally implement NAC, because it just doesn't work very well, because there's so many moving parts. It has to be set up just right to be able to work properly, and very often there's too many things that can go wrong. So it's one of those that just doesn't seem right. Whenever you're trying to put together, you're like, this is not working. This won't work 100% of the time. So that's one of the challenges. So let's see if we know. A number of you have answered this one, where your authentication has failed, but why? I'm going to take a sneak peek and see if we know. We really don't know. We're all over the place on this one. So 41% of us have said the time on the workstation is incorrect. Not quite a majority, but certainly the largest number that we have here. 28% of us have said the browser is missing a trusted certificate. And then we have a tie for third, 15% apiece, with the DHCP scope is exhausted or a duplicate MAC address is on the network. Well, here is another one of those questions that expects you to know a lot about the topic at hand. Notice it's not telling you what's happening behind the scenes. It's giving you a very broad perspective of what's happening. It says you're trying to log into Microsoft Active Directory. So it's up for you to know at this point. It's up to you to understand if it's Active Directory, then that's Kerberos. You have to make that connection immediately when somebody says Microsoft Active Directory. That is one of the most common ways to authenticate. And if somebody's trying to generically log in to a Microsoft Active Directory network, they're probably doing that from a Windows machine, so we can assume in that case that it's going to be Kerberos. So if somebody they're absolutely putting in their right username, they're absolutely putting in the right password, why is it still not authenticating? Well, for Active Directory, one of the things that becomes extremely important is the time of day. Doesn't make sense at first. Why would the time of day have anything to do with me knowing my username and me knowing my password? Well, that's because there are a number of different timers that are associated with Kerberos so that it can prevent things like replay attacks. Just one example of why the time is so important. And of course, Kerberos, whenever it hands you a ticket that says you authenticated properly, show this ticket to get in wherever you go. Show this ticket to the printer, show this ticket to your share, show this ticket to your internet proxy, and it will allow you access. But there's a timestamp associated with that. So you have to make sure that the workstation and the Active Directory system have at least timestamps by default. They're at least 5 minutes within each other. This is where NTP becomes very, very quickly. If the times are more than 5 minutes, it's not going to authenticate you. So this is a significant issue that you might run into. I've run into this problem myself when installing new equipment onto the network. This new equipment was trying to authenticate and get information from the Kerberos network, but the clock was wrong. It was never set on this particular device. So this would be an issue where they're putting in the right username, you're putting in the right password. Everything is exactly correct except the time on the device. And it's such a simple thing, but it's so easy to miss when you're dealing with this. This is why we always emphasize just run NTP. Run your network time protocol and you're going to be fine. That way everything gets a time automatically. It's updated automatically, unless, as we found earlier, you're dealing with something like my device here that is 2 minutes behind, that has NTP set on it, but not working. So I would at least be able to log in. It's only 2 minutes. So I would still be able to log into Kerberos, even if the NTP wasn't perfect on that device. And of course, the administrator of the Active Directory network can assign what value is okay. By default, it's 5 minutes. But you can change that if you're the administrator of the Active Directory infrastructure. So if we go back to their answers, the folks that did answer B, the time on the workstation, is incorrect. Those 44% of you, spot on. You've run into this before. You've seen this. You've seen the video. You remembered it. Absolutely correct. That would be B. The browser missing a trusted certificate. A trusted certificate is generally not required when you're logging into an Active Directory network. It's something that can be a requirement. For instance, we have that CAC where we're talking about where the certificate is on your smart card. The administrator might require that you have that smart card to authenticate, but that's not a common implementation, and it's certainly not required. It certainly has nothing to do with a browser having a missing certificate. That CAC card's not a browser certificate. That's one that is a certificate associated with you as a person, happens to be on that card. It's not a browser certificate at all. The browser's not involved during the Active Directory authentication process. And if it was, it would tell you certificate doesn't match. I've got a certificate problem. Here's a certificate issue. That wasn't the issue we had. The problem we had was that we were just not able to authenticate. The authentication was failing. Incorrect password. Not able to get there. 15% of you said the DHCP scope is exhausted. In that case, you wouldn't be able to even start the authentication process. You wouldn't have an IP address. And then 14% of you said the duplicate MAC addresses on the network. That's another scenario where you would not be able to communicate very well. It would be spotty. You wouldn't even get to the authentication process because the switch would just be flipping back and forth over who is the right MAC address. Why am I seeing MAC addresses that are identical come from two different places? And that has a whole set of problems associated with it that gets into managing your switch network, which is well outside the scope of Network Plus. But I can tell you duplicate MAC addresses are going to create quite a problem for you as you try to communicate on the network. You'll never get to the authentication process. That will never work for you. So that's an example, though, of something you should think about as you're going through and trying to figure out why won't Kerberos work. First thing I now always check, how's the timestamps? People are like, timestamps? What does time have to do with it? Has everything to do with it, especially when you're talking about Kerberos. Let's do another question. I've got another one here. Since we're talking about switches, I have a switch question for you. This question asks, a frame is sent to a switch with a destination MAC address that is not currently in the switch's address table. What happens to the frame? What happens? A frame is sent to a switch with a destination MAC address that is not currently in the switch's address table. What happens to the frame? Is it A, the frame is dropped? Is it B, the destination MAC address is added to the address table? Is it C, the frame is sent to all of the other switch interfaces? Is it D, the frame is queued until the MAC address is discovered? Or is it E, the frame is returned to the source device? So we've got 5 different options available here. So the frame receives a switch. The destination MAC address is not currently in the switch's address table. What happens? What happens? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You would choose between A, the frame is dropped. B, the destination MAC address is added to the address table. C, the frame is sent to all of the other switch interfaces. D, the frame is queued until the MAC address is discovered. Or E, the frame is returned to the source device. Maybe some of you have been working with switches. You know what happens with these. If you think you know, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer this one as well. Please don't answer in the chat room. We're all going to try to figure this one out on our own. You have to think about what's happening every step along the way with how switches work. What is going on there? And then you have to know what happens behind the scenes. How do switches handle situations like this that are really sort of normal on a network? Switches sometimes don't know where all of the other devices are. So what do you do? There you go. I've tried to step you through it. Maybe you think you know the answer with these. This would be one that this would help you to know not only for Network Plus, but a number of other ones as well. A number of other certification exams as well. So this would be a good one to try to figure out what's that switch going to do. You have to be the switch, be the ball, and you have to figure it out. You know, what does the switch do next? You have to go through your set of things that figures out, okay, if this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then that happens. But wait, what if we have something that's not normal? Although in this case, pretty normal. It's a pretty normal scenario. Number of you've answered, so let's go back and see. I don't have a lot of delay now with this YouTube. It's going really fast. Very few delays associated with this. So you can see that we're a little torn. I try to shoot for 50% of you getting these questions right. I've not been very successful today. The highest value we have, 32% of you said C, the frame is sent to all of the other switch interfaces. We almost a three-way tie for second. 21% of you said the destination MAC address is added to the address table. 19% said A, the frame is dropped. 19% said D, the frame is queued until the MAC address is discovered. And only 9%, single digits, said the frame is returned to the source device. Is it a guess? Were we trying to figure it out? Do we know? Well, in this case, this is a pretty common situation. A switch is not going to be aware of every single MAC address automatically. Let's say you turn your switch on fresh. You've just powered up the switch. It doesn't know where anything is. How does it learn where devices are? Well, a switch is going to learn where devices are by looking at the source MAC addresses coming inbound. If I was to send the switch a bit of traffic, the switch is going to say, oh, James just sent me some traffic. Let me make a note of that MAC address, and let me note that James is on that particular port of the switch. If anybody else needs to get to that MAC address now, I know exactly where to send it. But obviously, the switch doesn't know where my destination is. I'm obviously sending you information, but the switch doesn't know. So in those situations, the switch has to just send it to everybody. It cannot direct that particular frame to anyone. So it has to send it to everyone. Now, it's not going to send it to me because I just sent it to the switch. It knows it didn't come from me, so send it to all of the other ports on the switch. The way this works, here's a good example of this. Let's say that Sam here is going to send a frame out, and the frame is a source MAC address associated with Sam, 1,000 and all ones. And you can see this frame is a destination MAC address of 1,000 and all fives. Now, if we look at our map, we can see that 1,000 and all fives is the SGC server. But the switch doesn't know that yet. The switch has a MAC address table that's completely empty. So that's not going to help. When that frame hits the network, there's a few things that are going to happen. First, it's going to put Sam's MAC address in there saying, oh, now I know where Sam is. I'm going to associate Sam with that first fast Ethernet interface on the switch. Sam is coming from fast Ethernet interface 0/1. Now it has to find and send this information, somehow get it to this MAC address it has never seen before in its life. So what's it going to do? Well, it'll just send it to everybody. Everybody, you get a frame, you get a frame, you get a frame, and you get a frame. It goes to everybody. Now the switch is just flooding it out, all the other interfaces. You may be saying, but wait, that is really inefficient. I thought frames and the way that they were used by switches, just the term switch, doesn't it switch to exactly where it needs to go? Yes, it does, but it doesn't know where it is yet. Now, fortunately, if we're flooding out all of these addresses, it's going to get to the right place. In this case, it certainly did. It got to the SGC server, and the SGC server is going to respond back to whatever the question was from Sam. Sam was asking something of that server, so the server is ostensibly going to answer back. And when it answers back, the switch says, oh, there you are, 1,000 and all fives. I had no idea where you were. I was blasting this out to everybody on the network. We were flooding it. Everybody was getting it. But now I can add you to my MAC address table because I know that you just sent me traffic from fast Ethernet interface 0/5. And now all subsequent communication are going to now be directed directly between Sam and the SGC server. We don't have to flood the network any longer because the destination MAC address has been added to the switch. That's the process for those. Now, if that flood went all the way through the switch and we never got the recipient, it never got to that MAC address, then obviously it's not going to send that message back. So that's the scenario when we do this. Now, normally, some people on the network are mentioning, sometimes that happens with an ARP. Sometimes the ARP is the process that causes this. It floods the network, and the ARP is what causes this to go into the network. In fact, this might have been an ARP frame. Not always, though, is ARP used. There's times when you don't have an ARP available going over the network. There might be a device using proxy ARP. It might be a reverse ARP. It might be other methodologies used for this. But it's the same scenario for an ARP. This could have certainly been an ARP frame that we were trying to ARP for that SGC server. So very common to see that as well. That's a very common way to add things into the network, but you can't always count on an ARP to add those into the switch. Make sure that any possible communication that you're seeing on the network, and you have to watch how the switch was configured. Maybe there was an ARP done earlier, switch was powered off, Now the switch came back on. Sam doesn't have to ARP anymore. Sam's already got the ARP cached, but Sam sent this traffic out and the address table is cleared. So there's all kinds of scenarios where you would run into something like that. So looking at the answers we have here, if you did answer C, the frame is sent to all of the other switch interfaces. The 31% of you did get that one absolutely right. 18% of you said the frame was dropped. That'd be sad. We'd never get anything done if we just drop the frames as they're coming through the network. It's nice that the switch is able to flood this to all of the other interfaces so that we're able to at least get that to the recipient and hopefully have that recipient respond to us. B is that the destination MAC address is added to the address table. How are we going to add it to the address table when we don't know what interface it's associated with yet? So we're sort of ahead of ourselves. We first have to know where that particular device is. Then we can add it to the address table. We don't know where it is yet. So that's a scenario we're running into here. D was the frame is queued until the MAC address is discovered. Thankfully, we're not doing that. Think of how much memory we'd have to have in a switch if we were queuing up all of this traffic. And then what do? We just wait? How long are we going to wait till we finally discover where this device is? We could be waiting hours for SGC server to respond to anyone. So we're just going to sit in a queue. I'm not interested in waiting an hour. So no, there's no queuing of this until the MAC address is discovered. And only 9% said the frame is returned to the source device. That doesn't make much sense either. As many of you have already realized, why did we send it back? That doesn't help either. So flooding is really the best possible scenario here. It's the most logical scenario, and it is the right answer. C, the frame is sent to all of the other switch interfaces. There's a lot of things you have to know on the Network Plus exam. As you've gone through, if you've gone through all of my videos, then you know there's subnetting in here, there are interfaces, there are categories of cable. You have to understand MAC addresses, you have to understand IP version 4 and IP version 6 and topologies and proxies and all of these other things. There's so much involved with just knowing what's in this exam. So that's why I created these course notes. I highly recommend, of course, that you go through all of my videos and take some notes, but not all of you are able to go through every single video, write down every single bit of information. Maybe you just want a single consolidated source of all of these details. That would be my Network Plus course notes. I've already got all of this information ready for you. I've taken every bit of the important text and details from every single video, and they're available in these course notes. Here's section 1.1 Introduction IP. Everything's in here. Common ports. There's the common port numbers you need to know, and there's the Ethernet frames, and there's topologies and broadcasts and multicasts, all of the things that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. I put everything in here. In fact, the course notes, as I have them here, the 007 course notes, 66 pages of course notes. They are available to you as a PDF. The instant you purchase them, they are available for you to download. And you can put them on all of your devices, so no matter where you are, you're able to study this Network Plus content. This doesn't replace the videos. It doesn't replace your book. It doesn't replace hands-on, but this is something to help you as you're finishing up your studies. Maybe you're going through those last-minute studies before walking into the exam. This might be the thing that helps jog your memory with certain topics on the exam. I also have a printed version of this available as well. And if you wanted to get one that is a nice bound version of this and very high quality paper, it's all perfect color. It's a beautiful book. I really wanted to make sure it was a high quality book. I know you can't see it very well on this image, but it is something that you're able to take with you on this book, and something physical. And if you buy the book version, which does cost a little bit more because there's shipping and there's printing and paper costs money, but if you do get this, I throw in the digital version for free. So if you buy the physical book today, you also get the digital version to download immediately, and then I will ship this to you directly to your address. You can find out more about these Network Plus course notes at professormesser.com/NPCN7 for the Network Plus course notes 7 for the N10007. So hopefully that's something that could help you as well. Thank you for your support with the course notes. Thank you for purchasing these. This is what really keeps the website going. is your support of products like this. I like to give you something that can help you with your exam, and hopefully this is something you can find valuable as well. You can find this again, professormesser.com/NPCN7. You can upgrade from an e-version, an electronic version, the PDF version, to a hard copy. Just hit the Contact Us link at the top or the bottom of the website. Send me a note that say, I have this particular version, or you can open up a help desk ticket from your member login and say, I've got this version. I'd like to upgrade to the printed version, and I can send you a coupon for $20 off. And then you can simply apply that discount directly to this. So whatever you've already spent, you don't have to spend that again. That doesn't even make sense. So I can absolutely make that available to you. Thanks so much for your support with this as well. Let's look at another question. I've got more here. I want to get through a couple more before we're done today. Quickly, folks in the chat room saying, what's the difference between the Fast Track Guide and these notes? The Fast Track Guide is a product from GTS Learning. I am neither the publisher, the author, or the seller of the Fast Track Guide. That's a completely different third party that handles that particular product. The course notes are my product that come directly from my videos. So that's how those are differentiated out. Let's do another question, though. I've got one here for you. This one deals with cabling. We all love our cabling questions, don't we? And this one asks a question that's from my chat earlier in the week, last week. And the question is, what's the fastest Ethernet topology supported over Category 5 cabling? This came up twice in this last week. So I thought if it came up twice, this would be a good one to discuss. What is the fastest Ethernet topology supported over Category 5 cabling? Is it A, 10 base T? Is it B, 100 base TX? Is it C, 1000 base T? Is it D, 10G base T? Only 4 different options there. We have a 25% chance, if you're in the guessing game, to get that one right. What is the fastest Ethernet topology supported over Category 5 cabling? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer this question. Get that one. Make sure you know what all those are. The different categories of cable and the topologies supported for those categories of cable become pretty important on the network side. If you're designing a network, if you're planning to have network runs inside of a data center, between buildings, if you're just planning anything related to networking, the types of cabling that you're going to use will become very important. So make sure you know all the differences between. Some of these are untwisted pair cabling. Some of these are shielded twisted pair. So the shielded and the unshielded, when do you use those? When would be appropriate? One costs more than the other, and there's certain reasons that you would choose one over the other. Make sure you know those differences as well. I like in the N10007, they go a little bit more detail into the cabling. This is a question, by the way, that will apply to 006 or 007. So it should not matter to you which one of these it is. What's the fastest Ethernet topology supported over Ethernet over Category 5 cabling? So that's one we need to know. Let's see how we did with this one, since everybody is Googling. What I find interesting is the answers that we really got is number 1 and number 2 are almost always the ones I see for number 1 and number 2. 54% of you said C, 1000 base T. We've got another 35% of you that said 100 base TX. 7% of you said 10G base T, and 5% said 10 base T. So really, you've got A, B, C, and D are 10 megabit, 100 megabit, a gig, and 10 gig. That's what those 4 standards are associated with. So the question, you've got a Category 5 cable, what's the fastest network you can run over it? And really, we're sort of 53% of us said a gig, and 35% of us said 100 megabits. So which one is it? Well, let's look at the different copper cable categories. Here's the list of them right here. The ones we were most interested in was Category 5. So there's Category 5 right there. The maximum supported Ethernet standards, I guess the maximum would be the fastest one here. We've got 2 standards that are commonly associated with Category 5. You don't find much Category 5 cable out there anymore, by the way. Category 5 cable was certainly put in early on when Category 5 was created. There was a newer version of Category 5 created, which was Category 5E. The E is for enhanced. But you'll notice the standard for Category 5 and the standard for Category 5E, it's practically identical. All they did with Category 5E was make a minor change that would allow us to have a less crosstalk over longer distances. Otherwise, Category 5 and Category 5e are practically identical. That's why they have the same number associated with them. In fact, Category 5 you don't find anymore. Everybody uses Category 5e. In fact, what we really found was a lot of manufacturers who are making Category 5 cabling, it turns out when we're looking at the standards associated with Category 5e, they were already compliant with Category 5e, even though it was Category 5. So that's how close those are. No, there's not really twists. It's not much tighter. It's not much different in Category 5e versus 5. There are books for Network Plus that will tell you that Category 5 doesn't support gigabit Ethernet. Those particular books are completely incorrect in every way, shape, and form. So that's why this becomes an even more important question is don't be swayed by folks who are giving you bad information. You should absolutely know that this information is, it's pretty good to know that 5 and 5e are very close to each other. Minor differences in the twist, minor differences in the construction, minor differences between those two. But there are a few differences, but they're so minuscule and incidental that as long as you're able to, over that 100-meter distance, have a certain amount of crosstalk under the requirement, then it's a Category 5e compliant cable. So some people may increase the twist so that they're able to be compliant. That's up to the manufacturer of the cable. However they're able to make it happen, make sure that's what the crosstalk is when you get to 100 meters. So that's why we see in this scenario, when we're looking at this, the 54% of you, finally hit that 50% number I was shooting for. 54% of you did say 1,000 base T. That is the right answer. You can run gig Ethernet over Category 5, regardless of what anybody ever tells you. And that's one that's pretty important. Some people even ask after I said, no, it's a gig. You can run a gig over Category 5. And they mention, here's the book I was reading in the book. It's a well-known book that says, no, you can't run gig over Category 5. So it's not right. And they ask, well, what's the right answer? Well, the right answer is the right one. This is the great part about these exams is that there's an answer that is definitively a fact. And in this case, definitively, gigabit Ethernet can absolutely run over Category 5. End of story. So it doesn't matter what's printed in any other books. That's what the standard supports. You're in good shape. Is Category 7 in the N10006? Indeed it is. Let's see. Category 7 is not in the 006. Category 7 is in the 007. So there you go. The folks that can't remember, you can't remember because it's not in there. You're absolutely right, Junie, in the chat room. Category 7 was added into the standards associated with the 007, as I recall. And as you mentioned, yeah, some people did have Category 7 books. I don't know why books tend to go outside the scope of the exam objective sometimes, but sometimes they do that. I recommend always just sticking to the objectives. Will this help you knowing about Category 7, even though it's not on the exam? Of course it will. But my focus is to get you through the exam first. Then you can go back and do other things. We got time for another question, though. Let's do this. This question, maybe this would be a gimme. We're going to find out. This question asks, which of the following would be a common result from a port scan? Which of the following would be a common result from a port scan? Would it be A, a list of available services running on a device? Would it be B, a summary of outdated drivers? Would it be C, a list of installed security patches? Would it be D, uptime and availability metrics for a group of devices? Or would it be E, a list of unsuccessful login attempts? So this is one we do have to know these differences. Would it be A, a list of available services running on a device, B, a summary of outdated drivers, C, a list of installed security patches, D, uptime and availability metrics for a group of devices, or E, a list of unsuccessful login events? Which of those would be a common result from a port scan? If you think you know the answer, go to professormester.com/QA. Folks in the chat room saying Cat 6 and Cat 7 are almost the same. Nope, they're not. They are not the same. Not really. No, there's quite a few different. It's not, well, they're the same in that they're an unshielded twisted pair cable that you can run 10 gig over. I guess that's similar. And in fact, Category 7, not exactly a worldwide standard, kind of a fast and loose standard right now for those pieces. The Category 7, though, there's a number of, it's not like when we went from 5 to 5E. It's not like when we went from 6. Well, 6 to 6A was a pretty significant difference too. 6 to 7, that's a big difference. That's a pretty significant difference between those two. And quite honestly, not because it's not a worldwide standard. You do run into these scenarios where Category 7 is not even an option. Just use Category 6A. So it's one where you do run into scenarios like that. I'm running all of those. So be interesting to see what happens with those. So hopefully you know what a port scan does. That's where we're going to focus on these. I think this may be a good one to end with. I think a number of you have run port scans before and run those on your system. And I mentioned that because 73% of you said a list of available services running on a device. That is a common result from a port scan. That tells you exactly what ports are open on a device, and in some cases even goes down to the service level and can tell you what service is running on that port. And that's one where if you're looking at the list of things here, it's the only possible answer. It could have been because we had 10% of you said D, uptime and availability metrics for a group of devices. A port scan has no idea what uptime might be on a particular system. It's not logging in. It's not checking uptime statistics. It has no way to know that information. 9% of you chose E, a list of unsuccessful login attempts. That is, again, something only the operating system would know. There's no way to know that information without authenticating, and a port scan does not authenticate to a system. 5% of you said C, a list of installed security patches. Again, that's all internal to the operating system. There's no way to know. We're not running a vulnerability scan that we can at least check to see if there are certain security patches that may not have been installed because we're able to access certain things. So that would not be associated with that. B would be a summary of outdated drivers. Again, that's on the inside of an operating system. We're not able to see version numbers for drivers. And certainly a port scan is not going to be doing any checks of known vulnerabilities for a driver, even though this question had nothing to do with the vulnerability. It just said outdated drivers. So whenever we talk about a port scan, we're really looking to see what TCP or UDP ports may be open or communicating back to us across the network. That's all that a port scan does. Some port scanners can get into identifying the version of the operating system running on a computer. It might be able to tell us what specific service is running on a particular port number and maybe its version number. But it's not going to tell you any of these other things that I had listed in this particular question. Those are all something outside the scope of doing anything with a port scan. So if you did answer A, a list of available services running on a device, 75% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well, can you believe we have gone through another hour? We've got Q&A coming up. Stick around for open phone lines. Even though the formal question and answer is sort of over. All these questions, all this detail, all this information comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have these exam objectives, you are doing yourself a disservice with your studies. Make sure you go to professormesser.com/objectives and you're able to get that information from the CompTIA website. Download those. That's an important thing. Also, before we leave today, if you are watching this for an hour of CEU, Continuing Education Unit credit, maybe you already have your Network Plus certification or some other type of cert, and you're collecting CEUs along those lines, I'll send you one. All you have to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Make sure you follow these instructions or you don't get your CEU. Go to the top or the bottom. There's the Contact Us link there. You can, of course, in that, put your name, your email address, and then it asks for information to put into as a message to me. I'm reading through all of these. You can put anything you'd like in there. Just somewhere in there, make sure that you put this is the August 2018 Network Plus study group. That helps me find it much easier. And put the name of this special secret code word so that I know you watched all the way to this point. The code word for this month is port scan. Make sure you go through all of those. So that's your process. Contact us, put your information in, put it to August 2018 Network Plus study group and the word port scan, and then put whatever else you'd like in there. I read through all of these as they're coming through. And in about a week or so, sometimes less, I'm able to send you back an email that validates that you must have watched this. That's not required necessarily. CompTIA doesn't require me to validate this, but I like to send you a message. It's digitally signed by me. If you do get in a situation where CompTIA or anyone else is going to audit that, all they have to do is check that with my digital signature, and they'll see that it must have been valid, that it must have come from me. So that's what I like to do. So make sure you think about that too. There's also study groups I do all throughout the month. You can always find out when the next study group is at professormesser.com/calendar. We have another Network Plus study group planned for next month. Check in with us on September the 12th, and we'll do another one for Network Plus. If you're around here next week at this time, you can also come back for our Security Plus study group. Stick around for the next hour. I'm going to open up the phone lines. We'll take questions from the chat room. It's open phone lines. It's open. We don't have to talk about Network Plus. We don't have to talk about certification. We can talk about anything. Don't forget about the weekly pop quiz question for Network Plus on Twitter. You can check that out at professormesser.com/Twitter. I, of course, have all of my Network Plus videos. Every single video, every minute of every video for the entire course is available for you to watch free. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube. I'd love it if you subscribed. It does help me whenever I'm talking with Google about fixing things and making things happen behind the scenes. They know that I have the support from you. There's also my course notes. Don't forget about those at professormesser.com/NPCN. Don't forget the calendar is there. And of course, thank you for just being here. We're able to do these every month thanks to your support. Stick around for the next hour. We've got the after show, and we'll have any question you'd like to ask. Well, almost any question you'd like to ask. I'll be glad to do it. Thanks for being with us this time. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. So that's how, where at the top of the site do you put the secret word? You go to the top or the bottom of the website and you click the Contact Us link. Top or the bottom of the website. Which is really contact me. Contact me. Thanks for being here. Let's get the phone lines open. I've got things to click. I've got stuff I need to click on this side for the phone lines to be open. So let me click those things, and those phone lines will be open. You can also ask questions in the chat room at professormesser.com/live. That's available there as well. Let's go to my shows. Let's click host a show. Let's start the show. Got shows, lots of shows. Thanks for those of you that are having to bail. I get you. Thanks for being here. I'm going to call into my own show. Yep, that's how it works. Let me see if I can find on my screen the call-in that I'm going to call for my call on the call-in show. There we go. We're going to call. It's going to go beep, beep, beep. Here, see, it's doing stuff.
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome. And then I type a thing on my screen that does this. Ba, 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 ba. And it says,
digit PIN number.
Yeah, I got to put a PIN number in here for it to do this. On that PIN number, which is redundant, PIN number is this number. And then it says,
welcome.
Oh, it worked. See, you got to love that when you go through. So if you would like to call in to the show, you can call in on the studio line anywhere in the continental U.S., a toll-free number, 855-785-RJ45. We also can call in free anywhere in the world on Skype for free, no Skype minutes required. You can go to put a +1 at the beginning of that. So +1, 855-785-7545, and you call in if you want to. You don't have to. You can put questions in the chat room. We had a few people put some in earlier. We'll go through some of those questions as well. One question, and this one does come up quite a bit, the question very early on in the pre-show, somebody was saying, should I be doing Network Plus or should I be doing Cisco's CCNA, for example? And I think most people really mean the CCENT, which is kind of half of the CCNA from Cisco. People tend to make a comparison there. They're certainly both network related, right? Network Plus is certainly network related, and Cisco obviously is network related. But I will tell you, those two certifications, even if we look at Network Plus and the CCENT, those two certifications are drastically different certs. They are designed for different people doing different things for a different reason. There is a little bit of overview in Network Plus. The CCENT goes very deep into all of these topics. You have to know how to configure switches. You have to know how to configure routers. You have to understand how to set those interfaces up. You have to be able to troubleshoot them. You have to configure these devices to use NTP. You have to be able to recover if you forget the password. You have to be able to connect all of these up and make them work with routing protocols. That is very deep. That is extensive detail that you need to know just for the CCENT, which is only half of the CCNA. So that's what I mean when there's dramatic differences between Network Plus and the Cisco version of exams. If you're somebody who's just trying to get on a help desk, Network Plus fits for you. If you've been on the help desk for a while and you're thinking, I'd like to go into networking, that's where you should start looking at the Cisco exams. They are not interchangeable. You don't do the Network Plus and think, instead of the Network Plus, I'm going to do this one. Well, they're in no way comparable to each other. There's complete differences between those two exams, complete differences in scope, complete differences in emphasis, and certainly different reasons why you would get either one of those. Now, does it make sense for you maybe to skip over Network Plus and take the CCENT? There's certainly a lot of the Network Plus content in the CCENT. So you're going to be learning all your Network Plus content along with all of the other things I just mentioned to you. That's how deep the scope is for the CCENT. So that's whenever I work through those and trying to make people understand it's not something you can swap out one for another. And I see on the internet all the time people say, just skip the Network Plus, go straight to the CCENT. Well, that might work if you have a particular goal in mind and you're at a particular place with your Network Plus understanding. But they are in no way things you could swap out one for the other. It's not even close. And I have course notes available. I have an entire course that I created so I could create the course notes that I've not recorded. But I went all the way through everything you would need to know for the CCNT, and it's a massive. It's like 3 or 4 Network Plus exams. That's all the scope is. It's a lot in there that you would need to know. And this is me speaking as someone who has been a network administrator. I've been working with networking and security technologies for a very long time. And there's just no comparison between those two. You really can't. I think if you were trying to get into doing the Cisco exams, the Network Plus would be a good primer. That would be the thing that would give you that foundation, and it would make it so much easier when you got to the CCENT, because a lot of the things you already learned about networking and how switches work and what a MAC address is and how IP address works, you kind of got the basics. But for the CCENT, you have to know subnetting. You have to be able to subnet, as I mentioned, in 7 seconds or less. You have to be able to know how to do that very, very, very quickly. A huge chunk of that exam is subnetting. Network Plus, you might get a question on subnetting. You might get 2. You might not get any. So that just right there tells you there's a different scope with those two things. And that's why whenever I mention to people, don't think that those are the same. Don't think you just swap one for the other. That's very, very different in how they operate and how they go. Some people do mention, the chat room, somebody mentioned, the Network Plus is vendor neutral. Well, all it means is that the Network Plus is not sponsored by someone who makes equipment. It's CompTIA. But obviously in the Network Plus exam, in the A Plus exam, you are dealing with vendor-related topics. There's some Cisco content that's in the Network Plus exam. There's certainly almost tons of Microsoft content in the A Plus exam. So it's not that those technologies, it's not that vendor technologies aren't covered. It's that the people who are sponsoring the certification are not one of those vendors. That's all that means by vendor neutral. For example, you've got the CompTIA exams, you've got the new Pen Test Plus, you've got the CISA exams. Those have particular vendors' technologies that you have to know. So they are not the vendor's certification exams. They're vendor neutral, but only because it's CompTIA that's giving you the certification for those pieces. In the chat room, let's go to some more questions. Someone asking, would Network Plus be a good complement to Security Plus, or should I look at something different? It's hard to know the answer to that in a vacuum. The goal of you getting a certification is something that you've already set. You're already doing this for a reason. Are you trying to get your first job? Are you trying to get a better job? Are you just trying to learn some new technologies yourself? Or maybe you're not even going to take the certification exam, but you want to know the content associated with that certification exam. So what do we do? That depends on why you're getting that exam to start, why you're getting that certification to start with. That's the real question. You probably wouldn't, if you're getting Network Plus, Are you necessarily wanting to get Security Plus? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but it depends on what your ultimate goal is. Somebody even mentioning, I'm studying for my A+, but the N10006 is ending. Do I go get Network Plus because of that? No. The N10007 is right here. Don't worry about what version of an exam happens to be available at any particular time. You're taking the A+ because there's a reason you're taking it, right? You're taking that so that you can get a job or get a better job. Maybe you're trying to get that help desk position. Maybe the place you're working, it's a requirement to get a job where you're working or where you want to work. Pretty important to have that there. So those are things that are pretty important to see, pretty important to work with. Figure out your goal, figure out what you want to do, and then figure out what certifications or other things that you need to add to your personal knowledge to get to that goal. It doesn't work the other way. I see this all the time where people said, I got my A+, my Network Plus, my Security Plus, and now I'm trying to get a job and I'm not having success. Well, you went backwards. You have to figure out what you want to do and then get all of the necessary things in place for the people that are hiring for that position. That is the important part that you're working through. Whenever I'm trying to figure those things out, that's where you want to go with those things. Make sure that you have an idea in your mind where you want that to go. You don't get a bunch of certs and then go, okay, I am now hireable. Doesn't quite work that way. And it's never any one thing. It's never just experience. It's never just certifications. It's never just formal education. It's never just people you know. It's kind of a combination of those things. There's an X factor in there as well with working through those. Okay, that's enough of me talking about all those things. Let's go to the phone lines. We've got someone who's been nice enough to sit through me talking from the 301 area code. Hello, caller. What is your name and where are you calling from? Be nice if I turned it up so we could hear who you were, caller. Hi, are you there?
Hi, Professor Mitchell. My name is Tata Bimela. I am calling from Silver Spring, Maryland.
Oh, Silver Springs. Welcome. What can we do for you today?
Thank you. I just have a comment to make, and then I'll dive to a question. So, I'm a cybersecurity analyst, and a lot of people come to me and ask me, I want to be a cybersecurity analyst. Where do I start? And I always tell them that security professionals need to have some knowledge of networking. So it would be better for you to be good in networking before looking to get into cybersecurity. And I know that this topic is about networking, but recently there is a huge demand for cybersecurity analysts.
Sure. Because
of the recent hacking and going on data breaches. So given the demand for cybersecurity analysts, are you in any way thinking of maybe coming up with a course that can actually prepare people for getting entry-level cybersecurity analyst job, because the demand is terribly high. I can see that Cisco has this Cisco cybersecurity scholarship in which they are trying to train over 10,000 cybersecurity analysts for entry-level jobs. So
yep.
I did enroll in that scholarship, but the demand for cybersecurity analysts, it's growing by day in, day out. You go out there, you look for cybersecurity analyst jobs. They're out there in their millions, in their thousands, but there's no shortage of cybersecurity analysts. So I'm wondering if you've thought about diving into the world of cybersecurity and try to come up with something that can help people get entry-level cybersecurity jobs. I'm sorry if this question is out of the scope of the topic for today.
There is no topic. There is no scope. It's open phone lines. You can ask anything you want about anything, and that's a pretty darn good one, I think. And it's in the first part of this is with something I say all the time. I'm speaking as someone who worked at a next generation firewall company as a senior systems engineer for almost 7 years. And from there, coming from a network security company for another about 10 years before that, IT networking and security was a huge part of what I did prior to doing this full time. And you could not be more correct and I think people don't believe me when I tell them this, is that you can't be good in IT security unless you have an exceptional foundation in networking. Practically everything you do with security has an enormous networking component associated with it. Whether it's you trying to implement firewalls in a redundant configuration with your existing routing infrastructure and switching infrastructure, whether it's setting up the routing and the connections needed for an IPsec tunnel, whether it's determining your SSL or client-based VPN communication and how those IP addresses and configurations are going to work. There's an enormous part of what you're doing in security that is all about networking. It's almost like there's a huge networking with a layer of security put right on the top. Just the icing is on top of that networking cake, and the icing is the security side of things. So that's where you mentioned now we have this enormous need in the industry. This goes back for me well over 5 years. I was in a room of CTOs, the central technology officers for very large companies. This happened to be in the Southeast United States. And the question was posed to them, how many people have openings right now for security professionals? And everybody in the room raised their hand. And the challenge, as we were talking later, is that there's not enough people to go around. By the time you think you've got someone hired, they're now going somewhere else that's going to pay them more. This was about 5 years ago. This was just over 5 years ago. And the need was bad then. It's just gotten worse. There's not enough people to go around because it takes time to get to the security part. Just as you mentioned, you don't start in security. You start in getting your operating systems, you move into networking, and then once you've really got the networking down, now you're ready for the security side of things. Very rarely do people start in security. Although what we're seeing these days is some organizations are having to create entry-level security positions just so they can get some warm bodies in, and they'll just train them as they go because there's no other way to do it. There's not enough people available. So I am 100% on board with what you're saying. The question, though, to me was that how are we going to get these people? How are we going to train these people in what they're doing? And part of what I have been doing so far has been with that in mind. That's certainly my wheelhouse, is the networking and security side. That's where I have the practical experience. It's where I have the knowledge. And so that's why you're able to see the Network Plus, Security Plus, and some of the other products that I've created through the years. But you're right. Once you get past Security Plus, there's sort of a crossroads. Where do you go from there for security? There's a lot of different places. CompTIA now has CISA. They have the CASP certification. They now have a pen test, although that's a very, very special, very tiny focus of security professionals. But then there's these other certifications in the industry as well. There's the CISSP. There's the CEH. There's all of these other security things. And the whole market is very fragmented. Once you get past Security Plus, it becomes more of a specialization of certifications as you're getting into those things. Those are and then you, as other people in the chat room were saying, and then you get into things like pen testing, which unfortunately are very popularized by the industry. There's just not a lot of jobs out there. So I don't tend to focus on pen testing because I don't think it's as viable as people think it is. There are certainly pen testing jobs available in the world. It's a tiny percentage of what's available for security. It's such a minor piece of where most people should be focusing. Pen testing should be coming later in your career. It should not be the thing you start with for IT security. And I think you'll probably see that in most cases anyway. My goals are to create the content that the most number of people can use. And unfortunately, it's this fragmentation in the security market right now that really limits what I'm able to create. I can only create things if people are going to watch it. If I create CISA content, that's a much smaller group of people that would watch that than would watch, for instance, Security Plus. So I have to pick and choose. Do I do a Microsoft security? Do I do Cisco security? Do I do a manufacturer or a vendor security certification like Checkpoint or Palo Alto Networks? Do I Do I go to some of these third parties like CEH, which will never happen, but that's an example anyway that I'm throwing out. Those are the things I have to worry about and think about. So I'm always looking for input. I'm always looking for ideas. I'm watching the industry very closely. There's not been a lot of movement in the industry in the last few years to consolidate. If anything, the certifications for security are becoming even more fragmented, which makes things that much more difficult for me. So I know that's a little bit of inside baseball. It's a little bit too detailed of what I think about on a daily basis, but it's on the top of my mind. I think about it all the time. I think about what I'm doing next. I think about if it has the right focus, and I wish I could do certifications for everybody. I wish tomorrow I would have Microsoft and VMware and Palo Alto Networks and Cisco and on down the line, but I'm one person, so I have to pick and choose exactly what I'm doing. But I can appreciate exactly what you're saying, and you're right. The need is absolutely out there. I just hope that I'm able to put at least things together that will help people at least get to the point where they're able to do something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And you said something that really struck me. I had a job in downtown Washington D.C. I was getting paid $90K. I had a A plus, Net plus, Security plus, the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, and my first week on the job, I requested for outside ESM training, which is a SIM tool, as you know, and my employer provided me with the training in less than no time. And I was really ready to work for him. But in the course of time, I realized that people in my team were getting paid $120K, and I was getting 90. Now, I went to my employer, and I was like, we are in the team. I am much more senior in the team than many other people. Why is it that I'm getting paid $30,000 less? And they said, I was not a U.S. citizen. I was like, what has that got to do? They said I didn't have a CISSP. I asked them, if I produce you a CISSP within the next 2 months, will you put me to the same level as those guys? And are those team members having CISSP? They said, okay, no, okay, go get us a CISSP. We put you on the same level with them. Luckily for me, I methodically went through the A+, the Net+, the Security+, I'm the CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, and the all the resources that you, Professor Mesa, you have online, they helped me a lot. It took me 2 months to have my CISSP without even going for any boot camp. I just studied at home. I produced them my CISSP certificate, and
nice.
to my greatest surprise, nobody was willing to give me a pay raise, and I jumped ship, and I went away to someone who was offering me 120 plus 15% bonus. I mean, employers need to understand that they are doing a disservice to themselves by bringing someone like me and giving them spending $3,500 for sending me to training. I simply need to be paid in the same level like other members in the team, and they don't provide me what I'm asking for. And I leave, and trust me, when I left, it took them around 8 months.
Right.
8 months
right.
to hire someone. They hired that person had another full-time job and would only come and sit and fire over his other computer, and he's doing 2 jobs at a time. I mean, employers, I don't know if there's any employer watching this program at this time. They are doing a disservice to themselves by trying to underpay people who have some level, who have a certain level of experience.
The CTOs get it, but obviously when you're going through a hiring process, very rarely is a security analyst or a security engineer going to be interviewing with the CTO. That's not something that commonly happens. The CTOs, I just happened to be in a meeting where it was all CTOs. So it was very high level communication, very high level meeting it was a large group in this area, which is very unusual, but we really got to pick their brains a bit. They do understand how competitive it is. They know that it's hard to get security people. They're going through these problems with security people, but I don't think some of the management at the middle level understands exactly how competitive this market is. Even before there was this need for security engineers, or even outside the scope of security, maybe just talking about networking or servers or databases or data center management. One of the things we commonly say, or commonly in the industry commonly do, is we say you stay at a company 2 years and then you go to the next company because that's the only way to move up. And I know people that are on like clockwork. They are, oh, it's 2 years. See you guys later. I'm going to the next one, whether it makes sense or not. So you're absolutely right that the companies need to understand that the market is very tough right now to find these people. It's competitive. Security people who know their stuff can ask for and get the types of compensation that are very good in the industry right now. So this is why I tell people, if you spend your time getting the networking foundation, getting the security pieces, going to these user group meetings, continuing to learn in our industry, the sky's the limit. There's plenty of places you can go with this technology and make very good money doing it, but you have to make sure you put all of these things in place. And you're absolutely right. Maybe middle management will figure it out. Not everyone will. Not every middle manager gets there, but I would say that more people to you out there know what the challenges are with getting security people, and it's a matter of just finding the right one that'll fit. But I think you're spot on. You're right on the money.
Hi, Professor Mitchell. I see that there are 114 people watching right now, and some of them might be trying to get into IT. And let me just tell them my brief story and tell them that they can make it. First of all, I came from Africa. In 2010, I was unable to move a mouse. I didn't even know what a mouse was.
Right.
I didn't even know what a keyboard was. That was in 2010, and I came here at the age of 30. I started doing security, being a security guard, and while exploring what I could do, I figured out that IT was the first thing that came to my mind, because the president of the United States gave a State of the Union 2010. He talked about cybersecurity.
I remember
2011,
that.
he talked about cybersecurity. 2012, I'm like, if this guy keeps talking about this thing, it means that there is something about this thing. So I was like, I'm going to get into IT and probably get into security.
Smart.
I had my A+, then my Net+, and all of a sudden I got my first job with the United States House of Representatives. And from there, I got my Security Plus, my CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, and then I left from being a system administrator to security, and now I find myself with a A+, Net+, Security Plus, CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, CISSP. I have done specialized training in in-case and outside ESM. So to those who are listening to you at this particular time, the Professor Mr. A+, Net+, and Security Plus, it's free out there on YouTube. This is the best content that you can have out there right now. The other paid stuff, I have tried the other paid stuff, but none of them go near what you do, Professor Mr.
I appreciate.
I'm not trying to make a publicity of. I'm not trying to make a publicity of what you do, but I'm going to tell everybody watching your show right now.
Don't get me wrong. I'll take it.
Out there,
I'm happy to take the publicity.
Yes, I understand. The content that you have out there on A+, Net+, and Security Plus, no other content beat what you have out there, and it is free. And people tend to take free stuff for nothing. But whoever bypasses the Professor Mr. content on YouTube out there and the course note and go for paid version is making a mistake. This is what I use to get to where I am. I'm going to tell you this. I came from Africa with a GED. Right now, I am in University of Maryland struggling to get a bachelor's degree. I started making six figures without even starting my first year in the university.
Well, I can tell you, sir, that I did the easy part. It's you that did the hard part. And the thing about this, though, and the thing that I tell people about IT all the time is the opportunity is there. The potential is there. There's plenty of open positions on the security side and many other places within IT. It's really about the time you as an individual put into it. And as you've already said, You spend the time, you learn what you need to learn. It's very simple now to go out and get those jobs, move from place to place, move up in the industry, and be able to make the kind of income that you're making now. I think it's a great story. I appreciate you calling.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to keep the line, so I'm going to permit the other guys to chip in.
All right, thanks a lot. I appreciate you watching. Thanks for your support. I wish you the best in the future as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's not an uncommon story. Such opportunity exists in the industry. They gave me a job working in security. Come on, really? You can do it. You can make that happen from that perspective as well. Let's go back to the phones. The 978 area code is there. Hello, caller. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Professor Messer. Thanks for taking my call. My name's Nick. I live in the great state up here in New Hampshire. How's it going?
Very good, sir. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
Well, I was hoping you could help me out a little bit. I'm a little lost in terms of career focus.
Me too. Go ahead.
Real quick, my background is my background's in law enforcement. I have a bachelor's degree in administration of justice.
Okay.
I currently went back to graduate school to work on cybersecurity in an online program. I'm currently going for the Security Plus exam. I used all of your content. I'm also currently using your PDF notes and also Daryl Gibson's book, which is great so far.
Good combo.
I'm kind of lost though, because I have the formal education. I'll be finished with that in about 5 months. I plan to take the certification test within the next 2 or 3 weeks. But my kind of question is, where do I go from there? Should I finish the formal education and try and move into an entry-level job? Should I try and get an entry-level job now? Should I continue studying for other certifications? I don't really know where I want to end up, and that's kind of my issue at the moment.
This is kind of a balancing act that we run into, especially people that started in one particular part of their career, and then they make a career shift either months or decades later in trying to do something associated with security or networking or anything relating to information technology in general. And I tell people all the time, it's always best if you can get a formal education, if you can get some type of experience, if you have certifications under your belt. And the fourth one I always mention, if you know people. And it turns out the older we get, I can call myself an old guy. The older we get, the less the formal education helps, and the more the knowing of people really helps. And if you're moving from one type of industry to another, and maybe not even industry to another, you've got experience in law enforcement. That's valuable experience in information technology. I'm not talking from a security or securing the network perspective, but there is an enormous IT component to law enforcement. I myself have been in police stations, and I've been swapping out memory in the machine that does all of the DNA analysis. I have been working with the networking teams at the state law enforcement agencies because they handle all of the lookups and the coordination of identifications, of license tags, not only for the state that I live in, but the coordination of those queries across multiple states. So there's this huge component of technology that is behind the scenes where the people on the street that are doing such an amazing job at being face to face with what they reach out there have this reliance on the technology behind the scenes. And that's whenever I tell people, if you're moving from one job to another, there's a perfect leverage. If you're in transportation, if you're driving a truck, there are plenty of companies in transportation that use technology. If you're somebody who is a nurse and you want to get in technology, there's plenty of hospitals that have tons of technology, and who knows how that technology is used better than someone who's an RN. So it's the same scenario for someone like you that has a knowledge and a foundation and experience in law enforcement. It's not a simple move. It's not something where you can easily move into technology from that, because there's a lot of doubters, but that's where your contacts come in handy. And I mention this to people all the time, is that there's a people networking component to this that becomes so important, and you don't know how important it is until you get into a position that's maybe similar to what you're seeing, which is you want to move from one part of what you're doing into kind of a different role. Now, how can I get into that role with the minimum of effort? And people like to hire people they know. People who you've worked with in the past know how much your work means. They know your work ethic. They know you as a person. They know you to be dependable. They understand how you work with other people. That they know that that's a huge component of being able to work in another type of role as well. So don't limit yourself to just the certifications or trying to determine, do I do a formal education or do I do certifications? Sometimes these things are, there's not, let me say there's no single way to go with this. We just had the call from the gentleman in Silver Springs in the Maryland area. He didn't have a formal education and yet was able to move into doing the IT security and get paid very well for it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you'd be able to do exactly the same thing, but you can see that there's no line that you have to go. There's no rail that you're on to be able to move from one place to the other. Mrs. Professor Messer is a registered nurse. To be a registered nurse, you have to go to 4 years of college. You have to take your nursing boards, and only then can you get a job in nursing. There's a rail that you have to go. You have to pass through these things to get to that part. It's not quite as regimented in information technology. So when you ask, do I get a formal education? Sure. Do I get certifications? Okay. Do you do one or the other? Maybe. There's a very qualified maybe for you. It really depends on what employers in your area are looking for, the type of leverage you have with people you know in the industry, and how you think you're going to be able to do this. If you are sort of in the wind, you've moved to a different part of the country, you don't know anybody in law enforcement in your area, you might be relying more on a formal education. If you're in a particular area and you know the people at the police station, the state law enforcement, whatever you used to do, there might be more of a need to get certifications and then start in those roles. It kind of depends on your particular scenario. I know that's kind of a qualified non-answer to your question, but the answer in this particular case is it depends.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand totally. No, that definitely answered my questions, because my biggest issue right now is I'm only 23 years old, but I've been in law enforcement now for almost 3 years. I got my conditional offer when I was only 20. So I do know a lot of people around, but the issue is I work in a rural part of New Hampshire, so most of the places that I know, we all have our own quote network administrators quote, which is correct,
right.
Which is really just a gentleman who took a basic networking course and knows how to set up a switch, a router, and we use IMC for our data logging, things like that. So an IMC server, and that's pretty much the extent of what we have for networking up this way.
Gotcha.
So if I have the opportunity to, would you recommend, even if it was like an unpaid internship, would something like that really add to my experience, or should I focus more on my time on maybe more certifications? Anything
adds to the experience part. I recommend to people all the time to find a volunteer role, even where you are working with a company or working with an organization that's a nonprofit that just needs somebody to come in once a week and make sure the viruses aren't on their machines and they've got the latest version of what they need and they can do constant maintenance on these machines and that their backup process is working the way it should. That's valuable information to put on a resume. I tell people all the time, if you are in the help desk, you want to get into networking, find out what projects the networking team is doing this weekend. And when I say find out what they're doing this week, there's something going on this weekend. There's always something going on the weekend. They would love to have an extra hand, especially if you know the people. If you say, I want to get a role doing this kind of thing, go talk to those folks. It may be that you need to go talk to more of the larger companies. In New Hampshire, there's very large corporations. So maybe you need to visit more local user groups and find out who's working at those organizations and ask them, ask what you just asked me. I would love to get a role doing this type of thing in an organization like yours. What should I be doing? The answer is going to change depending on the company you talk to. It's going to change depending on what geography of the world you live in, but at least you'll have some feedback from people who are doing the job, who are looking for other people to bring in to do the job. And that's a lot more of a qualified answer than anything I'd be able to give you over the phone.
Okay. No, yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. And just one last question.
Sure.
What do you find is the best way to network with other information technology or information security professionals? Is there specific LinkedIn groups or anything like that where you can connect with a lot of people at once?
There are ways to do that through Reddit and through LinkedIn, but those are very broad types of conversations. What I have found in the industry, and this is where I've had roles where I was very regional in what I did. Most of the roles I've had through my career are roles where I traveled. So I went to different parts of a state or different parts of a geographical area, the eastern United States, the southeast United States. At one point, my territory was worldwide. I just would go from country to country. And whenever I would get into those places, though, everybody in that regional area knew everyone else when it came to networking or Microsoft or Cisco or VMware or whatever it happened to be. And it tended to be that way because we would all go to the same meetings. We would all go to the Microsoft user group meeting. We would all go to the Cisco user group meeting. Or I would have my own, when I worked for Palo Alto Networks, we'd have Palo Alto Networks user group meetings. And all of those people that would come to the meetings, we'd have 50 people in the room, and it'd be the same 50 people every time. They might be at different companies every time. You know, one time they'd show up and they'd be working for company A. The next month they'd come to the meeting, they were working for company B, because you don't necessarily move out of your geographical area. Once you set up shop, you're married, you've got a family, the kids go to this school, you don't want to up and leave. So you find somewhere else in your area to work. So everybody got to know everybody else. And it's that way in almost any type of industry, but especially in IT. And we rely on the knowledge because nobody knows everything in IT. You'll never know everything. And you always want to know what other people are doing. So we would be able to get a hospital talking with an organization in state government, talking with a manufacturing company, and they would all talk to each other about what they're doing for DHCP, what they're doing for storage over the wide area network, what they're doing for IPsec VPNs, what they're doing for different types of authentication factors. And they get to talk about what products are good and what products are bad. And you get to know people pretty well that way. Face-to-face beats anything. It beats LinkedIn. It beats Reddit. It beats large conferences. If you're able to get into a small group of people and have those types of conversations, it really does help. And at that point, you get on their LinkedIn. At that point, you're able to know people better. It all starts, though, with the face-to-face from my perspective.
Okay. No, absolutely. I understand. Thank you so much. And I appreciate all the content you make for everyone out here.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling, Nick.
Yeah, no problem. Have a great rest of your day.
It's one of those challenges with IT. It's never one thing. It's always something else. So there are some fun conferences to go to. People in the chat room mentioning, yeah, conferences are good to meet people, but it's not quite the same focused effort in your local group of people. And once you're there, you have to work to make sure can I get on your LinkedIn? Let me send you an invite. Let's keep in touch. Let's do that type of thing. Ideas of where to look in terms of volunteering. There were a number of really good websites for volunteering. Maybe some folks have been able to use some lately to be able to do more volunteering or find people looking for volunteers. It is kind of difficult to know. You almost do have to know people. There's probably a group of or a list of organizations in your area that are nonprofit. Maybe there's some organizations that you know about, you're familiar with, or you like. And maybe that's an opportunity just to call them and say, I'm an IT professional. I like what you're doing. Do you need another hand with your IT stuff? It's worth asking the question. Sure can't hurt. I know I would love to hear that kind of thing if I was in their position and needing somebody to help with laptops and desktops and servers and all those other things. So good idea of where to go from there. The 502 area code. Thank you for holding for so long, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, I think it might be me on the line.
It is that beeping noise.
I am from Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, welcome. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
So this is my first time calling, and I have a question. Do you take more of technical questions? Because I've been studying your core stuff for about the past 2 weeks, and I have my test, the N10 106, scheduled tomorrow at 10:45.
Oh my,
but I've come across about 3 questions that are getting me a little bit perplexed because the answers seem a little bit ambiguous.
Well, we can try to work through the ambiguity. If they're short questions, let's try a couple.
Okay, yeah, they're very short. So the first one would be just network admin X. He has installed a new wireless access point. The users can get on that access point, but they cannot get to the web. What is the most likely cause? And between the answers, there were only two that really made sense, but to me, one of them didn't. It was the wrong subnet mask has been added to the WAP configuration, and the other one was users have specified the wrong type of encryption, and the routes are being rejected.
I dare
that the correct answer is C, that the routes are being rejected.
I almost this sounds very familiar, but this also happened to be the questions posted on Reddit today.
Oh yes, that was probably my question.
Okay, probably because that does sound familiar. And I almost commented on this thread because there were a couple of questions posted there, and it seemed like there was a similar vein to both of these questions. But I hate putting this onto Reddit, but it's just a bad question. The question actually isn't so bad, but the answers are awful. And I read through your thought process as you were going through this, and I really felt you were pretty spot on with your thought processes. How would you be able to connect to the wireless network if there was a problem with encryption? You wouldn't have even gotten there. That scenario.
Right.
The way you were stepping through it was right on the money, but then it was leaving you with no answers. Which was even more frustrating. And other people were trying to chime in like, yeah, but what if? And then you start applying sort of an outside influence. What if this was in South America and it was a different power system? So you start going outside the scope of the question. That's where things sort of go off the rail. I really just wanted to comment, yeah, none of these answers are right. Except that,
and that's where I was just kind of stuck.
You were pretty spot on with your answer, which was these don't make sense, and that really is the right answer. It just doesn't make sense. There's just not a very good question, or it's not very good answers that were provided to you in that scenario. It's almost like they were asking a question but giving you answers from something else, because not having the right encryption has nothing to do with routes. And not allowing, it was just a mishmash of different things going on there. But the question did ask, which of these would be the most likely one? And a purist would say, well, you got to pick the one that would be the most likely, regardless of how ridiculous it sounds, which isn't the right answer either. On your exam, the right answers will be very obvious. They will jump out at you. If you know your stuff, they will jump out at you, and it will be very obvious that this is the right, most obvious answer. There's very few questions on the exam that are just wrong. They're just written wrong. They're not good answers. They're not good questions. You don't run into those very often. I would recommend don't get wrapped around the axle on these weird questions. Kind of take away from the question what you did, which was you went through each of the answers and go, can't be that because of this reason. Can't be that because of this reason. By the way, it can't be any of these because of these reasons that I just gave. When I see someone do that, you've kind of broken it down and you were able to see for yourself that's not a very good test question. And I think I understand the technologies behind it enough to say that, which in my mind means that you kind of know this content already.
Okay. And then my next question was, so the next question that I posed in that thread was about setting up your little Wi-Fi access point for it to be as easy as possible for users to get on it. And your choices were WEP, the Kerberos, Radius, and WPA2. But I couldn't find the answer on that one because for each of the users, I would say it would be what's called Access 2. But from the admin setup, I would rather set up the server and have the users link on and just have the one central service. So I wasn't sure which would be the appropriate answer for that.
I think somebody gave an answer for that one. I'm trying to think back this morning. I usually browse Reddit while I'm getting coffee. So at this point, it's a very fuzzy time in my world. So as I recall, the problem I had with the question was, is that it asked which one would make it the easiest for the user. And my question is, what are you talking about? What do you mean easy? Do you mean they only put a password in one time and they never put a password again? Do you mean that they only have to remember one set of credentials? Do you mean that they are never prompted for anything ever? Did they mean just the process of connecting to the wireless? It was really kind of a vague question what they were asking. And I didn't think that any of the answers talked about ease of use. It really talked about how you were connecting people to a wireless network. And there were advantages and disadvantages to all of those. There's advantages and disadvantages to connecting and using Kerberos or 802.1x on the wireless access point so that people only have to remember one set of usernames and passwords for everything that they do. Is that the easiest thing? Maybe. Do you do WPA2? PSK, which is a pre-shared key. So they only put it in one time. It's memorized in their computer. It's cached. They never have to remember it again. Is that the easiest one? Well, now you've got a subjective. Now it's very subjective. The questions you get on your exam are not going to have that level of subjectiveness. It's going to be very obvious which one of those things is going to be the easiest, or they're going to qualify it a little bit. Which one of these things would not constantly ask the user for a password every time they connected to the wireless network? Go.
Okay. And then probably my last question for the day, when would you use a Yagi antenna? The only thing that I've seen is like phishing Wi-Fi with like with the little Wi-Fi pineapples and stuff like that. I haven't seen a practical use case.
The Yagi antennas are very directional antennas. So if you go back to the old days, if you're at grandma's house and she has an antenna to get television on, it's probably a Yagi. And you have to turn it towards the direction that you're getting the antenna from. If you're someone who's doing amateur radio, you have an amateur radio license and you like directional antennas, you're probably using a Yagi. And for wireless as well, they have the smaller Yagi antennas because these are very high frequencies, so your antennas don't have to be very large. For amateur radio, we're talking about 30 megahertz and lower. You've got these enormous 100-foot Yagi antennas on top of people's houses. Well, for wireless, it's this tiny little handheld because you're dealing with 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. But it's all about directionality. So if you're going between buildings, it's probably a couple Yagi antennas that you're connecting to each other for that directionality. The question and the answer are probably trying to get you towards a very directional focus on trying to get signal from one side of the network to the other.
Well, and then my question, out in my backyard is my barn where I also have my wireless network, and I have it bridged with the two. They're almost like little disc antennas. Is that considered a Yagi?
That would be more of instead of a Yagi. Now you're talking about one that's focused more on receiving from sort of a lot of different areas and focusing the receiving into the antenna. And in fact, I'm trying to remember on the Network Plus exam, let me look real quick, exactly what antenna types are covered, because that's the one that's really going to make the difference. And if I look at my objectives, I get to type a little bit now. On mine, antenna types are... Well, actually, they don't go into a lot of detail. In fact, is Yagi even in there? They just have the correct antenna placement.
Omni and unidirectional.
Yeah, omnidirectional and focused. So that's really the only two things you have to worry about. If you do run into questions like that are focusing on antenna types, when it's going outside the scope of the exam objectives, I say just don't worry about it. There's plenty of things in the exam objectives you need to know. And I tell people, don't go outside the scope. Kind of focus on exactly what's listed in there. And in fact, is Yagi even listed in the antenna type? It's not. It's really talking about focusing on having the right antenna type for the right kind of thing. And in your case, would it be an omnidirectional antenna, or would it be more of a directional focus? And that's where I would focus my efforts too.
All right. Well, thank you so much, sir. You've definitely cleared a bunch of stuff up already.
You're getting down to the wire. Use those exam objectives. That'll be your checklist. Go all the way through it. Anything you circle, you'll know what to focus on, and you'll be able to get this done before it's over.
Knock on wood. Thank you.
Good luck. That's always a challenge, is to focus on exactly what you need to know. A lot of the questions you run to online, some are really good, some are real stinkers. Some are just not good questions. So if you get wrapped around the axle in all of these, always refer back to the exam objectives. Are the exam objectives asking me about that? And if they are, Learn everything you can about that objective and see if this question really does apply. A lot of the people writing these questions, they have good intentions, but the questions themselves are vague or not focused enough to really give you the right answer what you're doing. And quite honestly, a lot of the questions online that I have found, the ones that are good, sometimes are giving you the wrong answer, which is even more frustrating. Don't be caught in that either. Back to the phones, 856 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Professor Messer. This is Gene from Jersey. How are you today?
Welcome. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
Sure, not a problem. Quick question, Professor Messer. You spoke on today. I'm currently working on my A+, but you spoke on today during the network about port scanning.
Yeah.
Can you recommend free port scanners for home use to just watch over the network? And the second question, your chair seems to be really comfortable for you. I'm looking to invest in another chair as I continue to do my studies. Can you give me the name of that chair? And I really appreciate that.
Well, I give you there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is the best and really the only port scanner you should be using for anything is Nmap. Nmap is the ultimate port scanner that can do port scans. It can identify the operating systems on devices. It can identify the services that might be running on a port. It's able to do all of these things without ever authenticating into the device. It's like magic. And then it also has a scripting language that extends its capabilities many fold. It is it's not the easiest program to optimize, but it's extremely easy to use. You can simply type Nmap and an IP address, and the defaults tend to take care of almost everything for you. But Nmap has hundreds of different parameters and options you can apply to it, and you can customize Nmap to be very focused, perform exactly the way you would like it to perform. Back before I did my A+ series, I wrote a book on Nmap where I went through every Nmap scanning process. I documented exactly how it worked. I really went through the details of understanding how that program works, and it is remarkable. These days, I no longer sell the book because Nmap has evolved even more since then to do much more. And quite honestly, at that time, there weren't any books on Nmap. Now there's plenty you can get from other places. But that's the one I recommend. If you become familiar with Nmap, security professionals, they'll give you that heads up, like, okay, you know Nmap. All right, gotcha. You're somebody who's very familiar with Nmap. You got some street cred that you can walk in the door with. As far as the chair, this chair was one that it is extremely comfortable chair. It kind of looks like one of those very expensive mesh-backed office chairs that you find for $1,500, etc. But it actually is one I bought probably well over 10 years ago at Office Depot. It is one of these very inexpensive Chinese knockoff chairs, and I've actually been looking myself at replacing it, but they sold this chair for like a year and then it's been gone. They haven't manufactured it since I bought it. I can't find it anywhere. It's nowhere to be found. I found the company that makes them is the one that Office Depot uses, that they buy all these chairs from. The company still exists. They just don't make this chair anymore. So I can't even replace this thing that's there. I'm looking around at what I'm going to do, but the only replacement for it is one that does have, that is very expensive. I sit in this chair all day, all the time. It's just constant. This is all I do is sit here and create content. So I'm very particular about my chair, which is probably why I haven't swapped it out yet. It's worked pretty well. I'm waiting for the day that the hydraulics go out in it and I kind of shrink down in the chair and now it doesn't stay where it's supposed to stay. At that point, I'm going to look for parts and try to replace the parts in this thing just so I can keep this chair. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be looking at one of those pretty expensive, fancy schmancy $1,000 chairs, just so I have something that can always be there that I can use later. I wish I could give you an answer on that one. It just there is no more. It does not exist any longer.
That's quite all right.
Sorry
That's very helpful.
Gene.
Final question. I just thought of something,
Sure.
Professor Messer. Excuse me. When we was talking earlier to some of the callers referencing their certification. Now, let's say, for example, once you complete the A+, the Net Plus, and I'm looking into Security Plus, but I'm also considering the CCENT. I know what you said as far as how much is involved. My only concern is as far as the renewal process. I kind of don't want to jump out of the loop, so everything can kind of be recycled as I go forward.
Right.
So the question is the CCENT higher than the Surplus, or should I just jump into the Surplus and then take the CCENT? Just for renewal purposes.
Yeah, it's a good question. CompTIA has been changing what is allowed for renewal over the last number of months. It's not the same as it used to be, where if you were taking a Cisco exam and you earn that certification, it was worth a number of CEUs towards these things. They're really changing what they're accepting now for third-party certifications. It used to be this ginormous list. The last thing I checked, I'm going to go to earn non-CompTIA IT-related certifications on their website. And let's say you had a Security Plus exam. Let's see what they would expect. Well, it's still a pretty good list. It's not as big as it used to be, maybe a couple of pages. It used to be like 7 or 8 pages long. For Security Plus, if you took the CCENT or even the CCNA routing and switching, it would not apply any CEUs towards the Security Plus. So there's a good example of where things have changed a bit with what they were allowing and what they're not allowing. It's a very minimal group of certifications in this list anymore. However, I will tell you that gathering CEUs for CompTIA is probably going to be less popular or less necessary in the future. That's because they have something called CertMaster CE that they have created, where if you have a Security Plus certification and you want to renew your Security Plus, it is a product you purchase for $175. It's a online computer-based training program, and after each chapter they ask you questions and you have to get 100% on the questions. If you don't, you have to go back and take the test again, and you go through this in what they estimate to be 4 to 6 hours, and when you're done, you're recertified for 3 years. That's it. That's remarkable. Awesome. So you can go the very last day, don't do this, but you can go the very last day that your certification is valid, and just before it expires, you can run through this, complete it, submit it, and you're renewed in another 3 years and you're done. So that awesome. For $175, which is probably the same or even less than paying CEU maintenance fees every year for the Security Plus. It's got to be somewhere close to that. And it's so easy. You don't have to collect CEUs. You don't have to submit them. You don't have to worry about auditing the CEUs. And they have this for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. I would expect, because the CASP and the CISA are relatively new, I would expect they're probably going to have similar things available for that later on. But that I think is very valuable, which means you're not locked in anymore. If you want to keep those CompTIA certifications, you have a way to do that, and then you can go do whatever you need to do to really focus on your career goals rather than worrying about, is this going to help me renew things I've done in the past, which quite honestly is probably not the most optimal way to think about what do I do next to continue my career.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So hopefully that will give not only you, but a number of other people some pretty good ideas. There were some folks that came into my website chat room a couple of weeks ago, and they were trying to collect CEUs, and they were, where do I get all these CEUs from? And I've only got a week left, and what am I going to do? And I said, well, why don't you just take the CertMaster CE, and you're done. And they said, what?
Yes.
What? That's a great idea. And they did, and they got it, and they came back the next day and go, I'm done. I finished. It's finished.
Awesome.
I've updated.
Awesome.
That's a great way to do it.
Professor Messer, thanks again, man. I really appreciate all you do, your content, everything. I thank you so much.
Thanks, Gene.
You have a great day.
I appreciate the call. You too. Take care. That's such an easy way to do it too. If I was renewing my certifications, that's probably what I would do. I just don't have the time. I don't have the time or the energy to collect CEUs. I am happy to give you a CEU for watching this. And I told you about the process at the end of the first hour. More than happy to do it. A lot of people use these CEUs for other things as well. You might need the CEU for something you're doing at work. So I'm happy to give you those CEUs. But updating and renewing a certification that easy, yeah, I'm on board. I am with you. I would be glad to do that. So that fits into, I think, a lot of people go through. I don't have time to do this. Let me just sit down at night. I'll have some dinner. I'll sit down at night. I'll run through it before I go to bed. I'm now renewed another 3 years. I'm digging that. I'm all about that. So it makes sense for me too. Well, we're through a second hour. Thank you so much for your calls today. Thank you for your, in the first hour, spending some time with the Q&A. Thanks for joining us live. If you're watching on the replay, thanks for joining us on the replay as well. It does mean a lot. I love to get your feedback. You can always, at any time throughout the month, go to the top or the bottom of the website to the Contact Us link. All of those messages go directly to me. Don't forget to check the calendar for the next Network Plus study group. And of course, we have study groups throughout the month as well. You can find that on the website at professormesser.com/calendar. Thanks for joining us for the Network Plus study group. We will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.